Today we've had the opportunity to look at many different aspects of the Teachers Institute and the institutions that were born out of the Teachers Institute. We were able to look at the double degree program that was spoken about earlier today, honoring Dr. Ettenberg, hearing about Camp Ramah, listening about the culture of Hebrew at the Teachers Institute. And this session really is a wonderful culmination of today's program. Tonight, as you know, we have great honor of Rabbi Harold Kushner speaking in a public address that will take place in this room at 7:30, and we invite everybody to attend. And today, we're going to look at a, I might say, historical perspective on the Teachers Institute. And it's a session that is being led by our own professor, Carol Ingall, with three responses. Carol Ingall is the Dr. Bernard Heller Professor of Jewish Education here at JTS. She's taught here for many years, specializing in areas of curriculum and instruction. Her research work in portraiture in the field of Jewish education is very well known. Published numerous articles and books. There's a nice long biography of her that you can find in today's program, so I won't read all of that. I want to just highlight two things. One is my public acknowledgement of how incredibly annoyed I am at her because at the end of this academic year, she's retiring. Now, Bob Abramson said of my esteemed predecessor, Sylvia Ettenberg, how hard it was to say no to her. I clearly seem to be a much less effective dean, because though I threw her all sorts of blandishments and prayed and did everything, she's retiring. So her contribution to the Davidson School and has been just enormous, and she will be sorely missed by all of her colleagues on the faculty and by her many students. We will try to hook her in and keep her involved as much as we can, but we are very sad to see her make this decision, and we're delighted that she's here in New York and that we will continue to see her, and she will be able to share her wisdom with us. I do want to put a plug in for Carol's forthcoming book, which is incredibly relevant to today's celebration. Unfortunately, didn't get out in time for today. We've been selling hundreds of copies out in the lobby, but she'd be rich and could retire, so that would be yeah. So keep your eye out in the spring for Carol's book that she edited called The Women Who Reconstructed American Jewish Education, 1910 to 1965. This is a book being published by Brandeis University Press. These are biographical portraits of some of the well-known and much less well-known figures in 20th century American Jewish education, many of whom were very deeply connected to the Teachers Institute. There are articles by lots of people in this book that you know, including one of our panelists, Ofer Backenroth, including Shuli Schwartz, who was in the last panel, and many others. So take a look at Brandeis University Press website and keep your eye on this book that will be coming out very soon. What we're going to do in this session is Carol is going to give a presentation, and it is going to be followed by reactions and comments by three folks who are former students, or in one case, current student in the Davidson School. And we're delighted that we have such a wonderful and varied panel here. On the panel, we have, and I will not read all the bios of everybody, but just describe them. Dr. Ofra Backenroth, right here. Ofra is the Associate Dean of the Davidson School. She received her doctorate here from JTS. She worked with Carol as her dissertation advisor. Ofra is the person that makes sure the Davidson School actually operates. I am merely a figurehead. You think that's a joke. It's not true. So it's certainly Ofra's contribution to the Davidson School is absolutely immense. And I certainly couldn't do the dean's job without her doing what she does, and does so beautifully. And then next in line, Josh Krakoff received his master's degree here from us at JTS. He is the Chief Operating Officer at the Jewish Community Center in Rockland County, New York. Josh has always been very interested in the area that is sometimes called informal Jewish education, or nowadays experiential Jewish education, and one of our distinguished graduates, and we're delighted that he's here. And next is Sarah Tauber. Sarah will, with God's help and the help of the committee, soon be Dr. Sarah Tauber. She is finishing her doctoral work at the Davidson School. Her dissertation defense comes up very soon. She's written a wonderful dissertation on congregational rabbis as teachers, portraits of 3 rabbis who really see themselves as teaching rabbis, and I think it's a great contribution to the field, and we'll be delighted to greet her Bli Ayin Hara as Dr. Tauber the next time she comes through these doors. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the session over to Carol.
Barry, you are a very gracious person. Thank you. This session is about creating an American Jewish counterculture at the Teachers Institute. And one of the good things about coming at the end of the day is a lot of the really good things have been said. So as good teachers, we spiral back and we reframe them and we put them together and we hope that good learning comes out of it. So counterculture. We've heard Ramah being spoken of as a utopian community. Rabbi Gilman referred to it as being messianic or eschatological. It's hard to say at the end of the day. Joe pointed out that anytime you have something that is countercultural, there has to be a tension built in with what is the normative. So we're going to look at all the things that the Teachers Institute did that were in some ways transgressive, subversive, or challenged the norms. And I'm going to use the Jonathan Sarna School of Speed Teaching, Speed Lecturing. I'm going to make 4 points that I will share with you at the beginning, and we'll go through each one of them. So the first point I want to make is that the Teachers Institute under Mordecai Kaplan created a new understanding of what it meant to be an American and a Jew. The second point I want to make is reframing a pre-existing American Jewish synthesis so it became the Hebraist Zionist culture of which both Shuli and Dr. Schwartz and Nessa Rappaport spoke the last session. And I have to say that since you heard about having a Hebraist Zionist culture in New Orleans and having a Hebraist Zionist culture in Toronto, and we all know people who grew up in under the influence of a Hebraist Zionist culture in Boston and Chicago, that we know it wasn't only true of the Teachers Institute, but the magnitude of that culture, the impact of that culture was certainly much more impressive and much more profound than in some of those other communities. The third point I want to make is that what the Teachers Institute did that was countercultural was it changed the content and the venues of Jewish education. The what of Jewish education and the where it took place. And the fourth is the translation of that culture, the implementation of that culture from 3080 outwards. How, as Alan Mintz says in Hebrew in America, a certain group of committed Hebraists kidnapped the Talmud Torahs, and how they brought Hebraism, how they brought Zionism to the Talmud Torahs, and I would suggest changed the course of American history in that way, Zionized America, American Jewry. So the point one about Kaplan's rethinking what it meant then to be an American and a Jew, moving from the melting pot to the metaphor of the symphony orchestra, how to live in two worlds. Ira Eisenstein, the son-in-law of Mordecai Kaplan, tells us about two moments early on in Kaplan's life where he felt that enormous tension between being an American and being a Jew. And I'll quote Eisenstein there. The first occasion when being a Jew became a problem to me, this is Mordecai Kaplan talking, was when, as a child of 7, I migrated with my mother and sister to Paris at the same time that my father, whose long rabbinic training had qualified him for a Jewish academic or rabbinic post, migrated to America. He was going to join Rabbi Jacob Joseph, who was the first rabbi of the Kehillah, from a wonderfully also utopian idea that lasted 1908 to 1922. And Rabbi Jacob Joseph didn't last that long. So on the second Sabbath after our arrival, I remember attending school and being asked to write out some lesson. In order not to transgress the prohibition of the Sabbath, I told a fib. I said my hand hurt me. The next Sabbath, I stayed away from school. My predicament was solved the week following. My mother found a small apartment in the Jewish section of Paris. Their children were free from school on Saturday and Sunday instead of Thursday and Sunday, as in the schools in the rest of the city. The second occasion, when being a Jew became a problem, was about a year later, when my mother, sister, and I were on board a French steamer bound for New York. We were in steerage. It was Friday night. Announcement had been made that there would be fireworks on deck in honor of Bastille Day. I was eager to join the crowd to see the fireworks, but my mother would not permit me to go before reciting my Sabbath Eve prayers. By the time I was through, the fireworks were over, and I was left heartbroken. Since then, I've been living in two civilizations, the Jewish and the non-Jewish. Some of you know the background of the founding of the Teachers Institute, and you know about Kaplan. Just briefly, he became the head of the Teachers Institute in 1909. He was born in 1881. Do the math. He wasn't even 28 years old. And he was one of the shining stars, along with his colleague who died much, much too young, Israel Friedlander. And they were part of a group of young Turks, along with Judah Magnus and Henrietta Zold, that were going to save the New York community. They were all worried about the emigres from Central and Eastern Europe, and they had two concerns. Either these newcomers would fill the city's jail cells or the church's pews. They desperately needed to be Americanized and Judaized. And the Kehillah met, and they had to decide what was the most pressing issue facing this community. Was it jobs and labor? Was it the need for American-born rabbis? Was it, they had to quickly become model citizens? And the issue of the day was Kaplan's issue, and that was Jewish education. In 1908, Kaplan and a Jewish public school principal, Bernard Cronson, did a survey of what was Jewish education in New York at the time, and it was abysmal. I mean, we all want to believe that our parents were great Torah scholars, but let's face it. I mean, then you had 25% of the eligible children in any Jewish schools. There was miserable teaching, and they brought in Samson Benderly, who was a physician who had been kicked out of his residency program at Johns Hopkins because he was much more interested in running the communal Hebrew school that he had created. And he would be the marshal who would kind of clean up Dodge City. And what the Kehillah decided was that we needed a new kind of Jewish school for America. Everyone's interested in Minhag America. What is going to be the American way? And the American way, the Kehillah decided, was going to be the communally funded school, the Talmud Torah. And here's where the Teachers Institute would play a huge role. It would create a professional cadre of teachers and administrators. And Kaplan and Benderly shared the prevailing view that what it meant at their time, 1909, 1910, to be a Jew in America was a very flawed paradigm. The American Jewish synthesis, that was the regnant synthesis, was there's no conflict between being an American and a Jew. The values are the same. So all you have to do is reframe Jewish heroes, reframe Jewish rituals, reframe Jewish holidays around the American Christian models. No problem. Judah Maccabee as George Washington, the Bar Mitzvah as confirmation, Sukkot as Thanksgiving. Judaism is ethical monotheism, and you leach out all the particularism, all the ethnicity, all the distinctiveness, leaving a very pallid, Protestantized kind of Jewishness that fit in America. No conflict. But there was a second view of the issue of being a second view on whether there was a conflict on being an American and a Jew. And that was the view of Henry Ford in the Dearborn Independent. You can't be an American if you're a Jew. Jews will never be assimilated. And then there was Kaplan's position, which had been informed by Horace Kallen's cultural pluralism. The metaphor wasn't the melting pot, the metaphor was the orchestra, and it's value added for the United States. You get color added to the United States, the color of language, the color of ethnicity. And they found a perfect blending with this excited, idealistic, Mishugal Davar Echad, we've heard that, Hebraists and Zionists who were writing Hebrew poetry and publishing Hebrew poetry and publishing Hebrew newspapers. And that combination of TI and living side by side, the Hebraists in the United States, was what really energized the notion of a new kind of American Jew. Point two, TI creating the counterculture. We have heard Hebraist, Zionist, we've heard ad infinitum this afternoon about how the TI and Seminary College was Ivrit B'Ivrit and the rabbinical school wasn't. The teachers who taught there were part of this valiant core of idealists who wanted no part of that vapid, infantile, Parav Judaism that they saw all around them. So Kaplan creates this adversary culture at the Teachers Institute in order to respond to the problem of the children of immigrants abandoning the synagogues of their fathers and rejecting the Jewish homes of their mothers. That was why the TI was created. And the way you do that is you change the teachers. There's an article in today's New York Times Magazine. You create school reform by changing the teachers. So these graduates, who would be these transformative intellectuals, would go out there and they would teach in the Talmud Torahs, these communally funded schools that became the normative educative institutions for the first 4 decades, at least, of the 20th century. I'm a product of a Talmud Torah. The third point is that there was a revolution in content and venue of Jewish education. If you believe that Judaism is more than a religion, if you believe that it's a progressively evolving civilization, including the arts, Jewish languages, and a strong attachment to the land of Israel, then the curriculum has to reflect that. So Kaplan and his successors, Moshe Davis and certainly Sylvia Ettenberg, created an arena for this Hebraist Zionist pedagogy. It would shape American Jewish education for decades. Jewish education at the TI really was an experiential education for those who attended the TI. There were camps that they went to. There were clubs after school. There were arts, there was a theater group, and there was a dance performing group, and there was a literary magazine. So the students at TI lived in a total environment, like a good prep school does, like a yeshiva does. It was a total environment where it was wall-to-wall Hebraism and Zionism. Their lives revolved around TI. The fact that Shuli's mother didn't finish Brooklyn College and finished TI is no surprise to me. When you talk to Sylvia about her college education, she's much more excited about what was going on at TI than she was at Brooklyn College. Fourth point, the gender question. Mintz's challenge. He writes, the story of how a small band of committed Hebraists kidnapped the Talmud Torah, the communally funded supplementary school, and retained control of it for several years needs to be told. Okay, we're telling it. The answer to Alan Mintz's question is it was the women of TI and schools like TI. They were the committed band of Hebraists. It was the women and not the Benderly boys, the disciples of Samson Benderly, who actually, I think, really did Zionize America. There were 2 strands in American progressive education. I know I'm talking very fast, but we've got to move on. And one is the Deweyan strand, which is the experiential, the goal to produce involved citizenry, the idea that learning must reflect real life. It's not a preparation for life. And the second strand, and he's got a building name for him, TC, was the Edward Thorndike strand, which was that education, progressive education, they both called themselves progressives, was mechanistic, positivistic. It was concerned with quantification, efficiency, and the need to professionalize the enterprise. Benderly insisted on doctorates for his Benderly boys. So anybody who became a Benderly boy, although we've disagreed a little bit on this one, the significant Benderly boys, the names that you all know, Manny Gammeren and Berkson and the gang Dushkin, they all got doctorates at TC. They ended up as administrators of BJEs, the heads of denominational departments of Jewish education, teachers in the Hebrew teachers' colleges. The women at TI who were under Kaplan's influence, much more so than the Benderly boys, who were really Benderly's guys and just came and studied a bit at the TI and left, the women who were there all the time in this wall-to-wall education, they didn't have the advanced degrees. They became the teachers, and they kidnapped Jewish education one class at a time. They also wrote all the books for children, which hadn't existed before, for home and for schools. They were the camp folks. They were the people who started the adult education classes for women. They kidnapped, I think, the community for that period for Jewish education. And with that, I am going to stop, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. So Ofer, you go first.
Thank you, Carol, for inviting me to speak on this panel, and thank you, Barry, for your very nice comments. I will respond to some of the things that you said, Carol, and especially about the what and the how of the curriculum in the Teacher Institute. When I came to this, to the Jewish Theological Seminary to do my doctorate, I chose arts and education as my topic to study for my dissertation. And as the time came and I started to research the subject, I was talking to some people, some of you are sitting here, to tell me about the arts and Jewish education. And some of you said, we don't think that there is something like this, the arts and Jewish education. So I started to dig a little deeper, and I found out that in my own backyard here at the TI, there was quite a lot of arts and education. And the curriculum at the Teacher Institute dealt, as Carol said, with experiment and innovation, combine arts and culture, and Kaplan believed that while Jewish texts are the mind of the Jewish education, the Hebrew and the arts are the soul and the heart of the education. And he put a lot of his effort into the arts. He hired many people to come and teach in the Teacher Institute. Shmuel Goldfarb was a music teacher. He was the first one to hire. As Kaplan described music as a soul of Jewish life and Jewish belief. Judith Kaplan, his daughter, taught music here, and Tzipora Yochsberger taught. He had art teacher coming in as Reuben Leaf. Ari Kutai taught drama. If you look at the website that was created for this event, you will see many pictures of Israeli dancing with beautiful costumes. There were parties, clubs with a decoration of garlands and posters, and arts was exhibited on the walls. So it was, as you said, it was a holistic and an engulfing environment of art, of experience. People really needed to learn and do what later on they were supposed to go and do when they were going to be teachers at the Jewish schools. Hillel Bavli, whom we all know, described this particular environment in the Teacher Institute as warm and friendly atmosphere. He described the dance parties here as something absolutely amazing, that everybody participate. And of course, one of the issues was to teach Hebrew through all these arts. And as we all know now from research that probably was not known at the times that Kaplan created the school, its language is being taught the best when it's taught through other means. So the Hebrew was taught through songs and dance and drama and art. So the vocabulary was constantly practiced, and people had fun studying it, which was very, very important. The second time that I met again the Teacher Institute and what happened here was when I was asked again by Dr. Ingall to write a story about a portrait of Tamima Gazari, who was a student here and later on was a teacher. Tamima Gazari was herself a product of the Benderly Talmud Torah schools, She was the daughter of a family who actually did not feel the Jewish education was so important. She was very artistic, and her father wanted her to develop her artistic skills, either the piano that she played very beautifully, but she was very interested in art, and he used to take her to study art. However, one day when she was 7 years old, she went by a Benderly school, and she saw the teachers dancing and singing with the students, and she said, that's where I want to be. And she went and she enrolled herself in the Talmud Torah. Eventually, she came here to the Teacher Institute in 1921, and she was a student here. I did major research in the archives of the library here at JTS, and I looked at her grades in her transcripts. And she was, let's say, she was a good student, not excellent student, but in her practicum, she was excellent. Later on, when I interviewed her, she said, Mordechai Kaplan could tell that I was creative and I could reach people through the arts. So when she graduated, he invited her to come and teach in his school on 86th Street in SAJ, and he commissioned her to write the curriculum to the school and integrate the arts into the curriculum of this particular school. And in 1936, he invited her to come and teach here in the school and to be the art teacher of the Teacher Institute. And mind you, whoever is a student in Davidson, the art classes were for credits, and they were required classes, not like the arts as exegesis that you're taking now, which is an elective. I teach a class on arts as exegesis, but it's an elective. It used to be a required course, 2 credits. Everyone had to take it, because the idea, again, was you are going to work with people, you need to learn, you need to experience what later on you are going to do with the students. You cannot ask students to make art or to do crafts without you really understand what to do. So what was the class? A 2 credits course required of all teachers to train the prospective teacher in the use of drawing and design as aids to the teaching process and to correlate arts and crafts with the various subjects of the Hebrew school curriculum. And for this particular portrait, I interviewed Sylvia Ettenberg, who explained the whole idea that you are going to be a teacher and you're going to do crafts and arts with your students, and you need to know about it. And then there was another idea. People came to the Teacher Institute from many different places. And Mordechai Kaplan and Tamima Gazari felt that they need to give them whole experience. They took them to museums, they took them to art galleries, they taught them art appreciation. The teachers needed to be educated people. They needed to be able to have this knowledge that later on they will give on to their students and to serve as a role model. I spoke with some people who took classes here, and the thing that was the most important to everyone was that it was always a process. It was not the product. So people did not have to be afraid that they were not artists themselves, that the process of learning the text and how to translate it into art and how to talk about it, this was the important process. So it was very welcoming and very inclusive. And in a way, I think that it really symbolized whatever happened here in the school. Everyone was studying here. It was not only the conservative movement that came here. It was people of all kind of affiliation and Jewish religious affiliation came here. And it's, I just want to comment one more thing. I don't know if I'm over my time, about one art form that I think that symbolize what happened here. At a certain point, Mordechai Kaplan commissioned Tamima Gazari to create a mural to his synagogue. And Tamima was very excited about this idea of creating a mural. And the idea behind the mural is that it's a community project. Mural is something that describes everybody and it's for everyone. It's not a picture that one person does or it's only about a portrait of someone. It's about everyone. And if you look at this mural, you will see that it really creates the spectrum of all Jewish people, from the Hasidic Jew to the Israeli with a Kova Tembel going to walk the land. Okay.
I have to say, I feel woefully unqualified to be on this panel. Yes, I was a student here, but no, not a doctorate, and nowhere near a doctorate. But I will do something my mom suggested a long time ago. I will speak about what I know. I spent over 12 years in the JCC movement as a professional. I want to talk about the JC movement as one of the legacies of Mordechai Kaplan's ideology and the state of the JC movement today, which may be to some of you alarming. Certainly it is to me. The JC movement is in the process right now under the leadership of Alan Finkelstein, really looking closely at how we do business. Certainly the situation last year with the financial situation, I don't go into details, was a good opportunity to look closely at how we do our work, partially because a lot of money was lost, but partially because there have been a lot of changes in the last 20 years, staffing changes, programmatic changes in the JC movement that really have affected negatively, I think, in some ways, and positively, how successful we are at bringing Jewish people in, helping them along their Jewish journey. That's what JCCs see themselves as. We are helping people along their Jewish journey. Often we say we're the first gateway into Jewish life for people. As a student here, Mordechai Kaplan's ideology spoke to me. I didn't speak literally with him, but I did really resonate very heavily with the idea that Judaism was more than a religious observance, that there was a civilizational piece to it, a language, a culture, a humor, a community. And I think that's why the JC movement to me has felt like a real home. In the process, you know, the JCs began as a way to enculturate Jews who are immigrating to the United States, help them learn about what it means to be an American. And since 1854, when the first JC was founded, it wasn't a JC then, the movement has evolved, but continued to serve the needs of the community in different ways. Today, if you go to JCs, you'll see that they have really come out to the forefront of working with people with special needs. This has been a major area that JCs have focused on. They serve a lot of both Jews and non-Jews. Autism and disabilities has been a big area of focus. Wellness has been an area. For a long time, fitness became one of the main financial underpinnings of how the JCs paid the bills. But now the real push is to look at it in a more expansive way. How do we look at the large health issues that are facing American Jews and Americans in general? Obesity, childhood obesity in particular, Parkinson's, cancer. This has been an area that JCs have really surged forward to answer the call and have come under a lot of attention for. You have the effects of cultural assimilation. We have yoga, we have Zumba, we have salsa, we have belly dancing. All these kinds of things happen. But the big question I have is, what about the J? Like, what about the J and the JCC? And my feeling, having done some cursory research into my work experience, is that that is the piece that actually is disappearing most quickly and is quite alarming. And it's for several reasons, which I'm going to go over. The first being the disappearance of the professional Jewish educator at many JCCs. The second is the competition for community dollars, especially in smaller communities. And the third is the professionals and the level of the professionals in the agency. As I said before, a professional Jewish educator used to be a standard part of the staff of every JCC. It's not so now. Many JCCs don't employ professional Jewish educators on the staff. It becomes part of someone else's job. It's not the job title in itself. Many times it's given as a sub-job to someone who doesn't really have the qualifications to do it or the knowledge or the background to do it. Jewish values has been relegated to the level of coalescence. Jewish values are completely equated with American moral values. You see this very heavily in teen programs at JCCs. You want to connect teens in mitzvah projects. The definition of mitzvah is very hazy. What exactly is a mitzvah? What exactly do we mean? And to get those kids in there, because all of them need community service hours, which is the key to get them in the door. you make that sort of, well, it's, this is the same thing all Americans believe. Be good to each other. Help the poor. Help the needy. The Jewish piece, the specific Jewish piece of it, I think is becoming lost in the background noise. Long gone are the days of the teen center. I don't even know if they ever were highly populated by teens, but the teen center age is gone. You have to draw teens in, our young teens in, with this little candle, this little carrot, of community service hours. There's a reluctance community-wide to pay for Jewish services, not observance services, not religious services, but Jewish education, Jewish programming. As a longtime programmer, it was very hard to get people to come in to celebrate Lag BaOmer. You can get them for the big ones, Hanukkah, Passover, and maybe Purim, maybe. There's a lot of competition with synagogues over Purim, which I'll get to. But it's hard to get people to pay for Jewish learning opportunities that are not specifically holiday-based. If you make it free, if you can have the funds to support it, you may get people. But it's really hard to draw people in. There's an evolving, JCs have an evolving, I guess the American Jewish community has an evolving relationship with Israel. The benefactor relationship has changed to more of an equal level conversation relationship. But JCs have had a hard time really bringing Israel to their community. Hebrew is not widely spoken. There are a lot of non-Jewish staff, or even Jewish staff who don't have the skills to even know, say Shabbat Shalom or do a holiday greeting. So there's beyond that, there's not a lot of other Hebrew skills. And in terms of knowledge or the ability to translate a connection of what Israel is, it's complicated. I don't mean to make this so serious, but, and I think as many people have the challenge of connecting young Jews to such a faraway place as Israel. For all those JCs that have nursery schools, how do you make Israel come alive? And it's a challenge curriculum-wise the JCC movement is trying to address with curriculum development, but it's difficult. I think JCs have been most successful in programs like camps, which really have the legacy of experiential education, camps and nursery schools, which try to employ many we try to engage on a lot of these topics, but beyond camp, when someone leaves camp, the connection is often lost. And then, there's the growth of the non-Jewish membership. We have to be realistic here. JCCs have to pay their bills. Often the pool and the fitness center is the largest source of revenue for a JCC. So at both the JCCs that I've worked at, it accounts for over 35 to 40% of the agency's revenue, which means they can't keep their doors open without that. So it affects, unfortunately, the agency overall. Very quickly, you see this especially, I want to talk about competition for community dollars. It sort of overlaps a little bit. This has been a challenge because you see a lot of competition, especially in smaller communities, not as much when I worked in Manhattan, between synagogues and Jewish community centers. And where is the overlap in services? So synagogues, there's been a lot of support to try to bring in experiential education into synagogues. There's been a lot of movement around this. Some JCCs have explored, the JCC in Manhattan most recently, explored bringing in an experiential Jewish Hebrew school type of program. There was a lot of conflict over that. In smaller communities where there are fewer Jews, you have the question of, well, it's so expensive to affiliate to a synagogue. It's so expensive to belong to a JCC. Where am I going to put my dollars? And people who do not have a lot of money, which is a lot of people, have to make a decision. Where am I going to invest my resources? Am I going to invest my resources in the synagogue? Am I going to invest it in the JC? And I think this has an impact for our whole community. The Kehillah concept has really come out as something there's a lot of energy around. How do you do a one pass, a one level price? I think a lot of communities are playing with this. Some, I think, are even experimenting with this now. But I think it's an area that there's going to be a lot of groundswell over for the future. The last thing really is the professionals. One, I think across the nonprofit sector, definitely across the Jewish nonprofit sector, there is a leadership gap. So we have a lot of people who will be retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. That's very upsetting to me. And you have a gap in leadership, people who have been trained, who have the Jewish education to fill these roles in JCCs. That's separate from the issue of engaging people in the activity, because I do feel like if you have a person who's really skilled, there is a way. If there's a will, there's a way. But we're coming to a point where there's going to be a gap in people who are really skilled and able to do this work in JCCs. There's too much, this is my job and not my profession. I see this with most of my staff. They don't identify the work they do as a profession, and I think that is the detriment of our work. We have to, as a community, identify that what we do, we're professionals. This is real work, and it's not just, a 9 to 5. I mean, one of the things that was so striking about what I read from what Carol wrote was that these women viewed this as their calling. I don't see that at all, and I think, it's sad. Certainly, people talk about low salary, poor benefits, lack of opportunities for professional development. In small agencies, there's also not a lot of opportunity for upward growth, which is really not attractive to young people who are looking to chart their career growth and really want to see where is my next step. And you also have the challenge of non-Jewish staff, and I don't think JCCs have really invested the time and the energy in educating not just non-Jewish staff, but Jewish staff without the knowledge. And I think we often assume that just because you're Jewish, especially in JCCs, you know what all these holidays mean, and you're able to translate that, and it's just not the case. As someone who did not come from an observant family, I know that that's not the case, and we have to invest in the Jewish education of our staff. And of course, relating to the women who really hijacked TI, you see a lot of women working in JCCs. You do not see a lot of women at the top. And that is a problem. And just to quote, in 2006 JCC salary survey, now I know it's 4 years out of date, but executives at the executive level, 58% were men and 24% were women. So there's a difference. I don't know. Oh, no, sorry. I'm sorry. No. It must be like 70-30. No, it's out of 56, 70, 82. Out of the 82 that answered, 58 were women and 58 were men and 24 were women, excuse me. And the salary difference, men were making 10% more than women. So it's a challenge, and how is this being answered? As I said, the JC movement is really in the process of re-examining how we do our work. What is the value of the Jewish? How do you bring the Jewish to the table?
All right, I'd like to thank Barry Holtz and Carol Ingall for inviting me to come and speak here today. It's especially a great honor because I am a doctoral student working with Carol on my dissertation. So it's a special privilege to be able to speak in front of her. After I read the introductory chapter in Carol's forthcoming book, in which she discusses the history of the Teachers Institute, I was struck by the parallels between her analysis and a provocative essay written by someone who was closely involved with the Teachers Institute and its offshoots for a very long time, one of the former chancellors of JTS, Gershon Cohen, Zichrono Livracha. His essay, The Blessing of Assimilation in Jewish History, was originally a commencement speech given in 1966, coincidentally at one of Carol's own alma maters, Hebrew Teachers College in Boston, now known as Hebrew College. For those of you who are familiar with this essay, it may seem paradoxical to refer to Cohen's favorable analysis of the influence of assimilation in Jewish history in light of the Teachers Institute express mission to fight assimilation among American Jews. I might add that in this essay, Cohen did not minimize the fact that assimilation has always represented a challenge for the Jewish people because it presents a risk of drawing Jews away from Jewish life. Yet he forcefully and quite persuasively argued, and here I'm going to quote directly from his essay, that a frank appraisal of the periods in which Judaism flourished will indicate that not only did a certain amount of assimilation and acculturation not impede Jewish continuity and creativity, but that in a profound sense, this assimilation and acculturation was a stimulus to original thinking and expression, a source of renewed vitality. Close quote. How then might Cohen's thesis apply to Carol's important insights about the Teachers Institute? I would like to suggest that there is an idea that implicitly runs through Carol's analysis, one that is worthy of attention by scholars and practitioners alike during this era when the future of our educational institutions in both the Jewish world and in the larger American society seems to be a matter of great concern to some of us. The idea is that the progressive educational principles articulated by the Teachers Institute's founders and graduates reflect a profound appreciation and understanding of the critical place of education in sustaining a flourishing democratic society, including sustaining the Jewish communities in that democratic society. If we consider the contributions of the Teachers Institute from this philosophical perspective, I believe it is reasonable to claim that the founders and graduates were very much assimilated into the currents of thought that were alive in American society during that era. And here I speak of assimilation in the constructive sense that Gershon Cohen intended in his essay. For example, the many ideas generated by the Teachers Institute about the possibility of transforming society, in this case, American Jewish society, through the influence of educational institutions, earns them a place at the discussion table concerning the nature and purposes of education in participatory democracies, and not only in Judaism. Through formulating answers to questions about the aims of Jewish education, the founders and graduates saw themselves as learners as much as they perceived themselves as experts, as did other educational progressives of their time. Kaplan and his associates were eager to debate among themselves the foundational principles of Jewish education and to experiment with renovations to earlier received notions about the practice of education, all with the goal of reforming the Jewish community of their time. In this way, they were very much modeling approaches adopted by John Dewey and other progressives, and in the process, they were expressing what Gershon Cohen in his essay describes, and here I quote him again, as a readiness to give voice to the tradition in the language of their own time and place. End of quote. I would like to pose three questions that emerge from the argument that the principles and practices guiding the Teachers Institute were profoundly rooted in an appreciation of a democratic ethos and its relation to education. The first question involves the underlying outlook that animates the educators who work in our Jewish institutions today. Namely, how many of them, how many of us, and I include myself as a Jewish educator because I teach at a Jewish day school and I'm also a researcher, believe that supporting democratic processes and democratic values is vitally important to our mission as Jewish educators. And if it is, how do we manifest that commitment at all levels? And if it is not, what does that say about the current and future direction of Jewish education in a democratic society such as the United States? The second question involves reflecting on the role of teachers, camp counselors, and other non-supervisory educators. Do these people find that their voices are welcomed and included in decision-making about matters as broad as curriculum, programming, testing, standards, evaluation, and dare I say it, even hiring and firing in our Jewish institutions? At a time in American society when job security is a matter of heightened anxiety for so many of us, do teachers and others in similar positions find that they can engage democratically in open dialogue, civil discussion, and even respectful disagreement with their supervisors and not have their employment status threatened? Finally, to return to Gershon Cohen's thoughts, it is evident that assimilation is never a one-way street in which the minority group only takes but does not enrich the majority culture at all. Therefore, my third question is as follows. Are Jewish educators interested in participating in discussions about the nature and purposes of education in a democratic society with educators from other religious groups, from other ethnic minorities, and with those in general American education? Are Jewish educators willing and are they able to encounter and engage these other groups about issues that are vital to all of us for the benefit not only of American Jewish life, but also for the good of the society to which we all belong? In other words, and I put it rather bluntly, Does Jewish education have anything of significance to contribute to the larger American culture of which we are all a part? It seems to me that the history of the Teachers Institute provides us with a great deal of material for thinking about possible answers that the current generation of Jewish educators might and should give to these kinds of questions, issues that have a far-reaching influence in shaping American education, not only within the boundaries of our Jewish institutions, but perhaps even beyond them as well. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank all four presenters for a really interesting session. We're just about the end of our time, but I can take a couple of questions or comments if people want to. Yes.
First of all, thanks to the panel for the presentations and for the stimulating thought. Mr. Brekoff in particular. In my community, Great Neck, which you may be familiar, we have two JCCs in the immediate vicinity. We have in Queens, we have the Seminary Field Y, and further out on Long Island, we have the St. Jacobson. Now, we have over the course of years, and granted, we haven't done this in recent years, but years ago when I was involved in a different aspect of the school program, when I was running the school, we had arrangements with both of them. With the St. Jacobson Y, we contracted with them to have some of their youth workers come and do a pre-class program with some of our kids who are arriving early for class, and we had nothing to do with them. Out of that grew something very interesting, because the young woman who came over to direct it, who herself was an artist, as a matter of fact, subsequently joined our faculty full-time as our art teacher, but that was an unintended benefit. We also got out of that, one of the men who came, who she took on to do this, became our youth director for the high school. But that, as I say, that was unintended. But that was a relationship we had. At one time, we were thinking about working out some kind of joint membership. And some of our people did take part in some of the WISE programs. Now, with the St. Jacobson, we did it on the other end of the scale. And that is that we wanted to deal with bereavement groups. And they were doing that. So we worked out with them an arrangement whereby they would either come to us or we would send our people to them to take advantage of the programs they ran. Now, you were talking about some of the problems of the centers and the synagogues. Is that a model that could be improved upon, that could be adopted? Is it prevalent elsewhere? What do you think about that?
I mean, this is a conversation that's happening across the U.S., and I don't think it even originated with the, in the glass tower, so to speak, of JCC Association. We need to look at those models because people are voting with their feet and are voting with their dollars. And they're going to make a choice about where to affiliate. And it's not always going to be a JCC, and it's not always going to be a synagogue. And I do think both the synagogue and the JCC can enrich each other. The problem becomes when they're so afraid to have a conversation. So just to give my own community as an example in Rockland, certainly anything I say will stay in the room. Rockland is a growing Orthodox community, but a shrinking non-Orthodox Jewish community. So there are not a lot of young Jews, non-Orthodox Jews moving to the community. And so every year that passes, another synagogue or two is either closing or merging. Not every year, but every few years, there's a lot of talks about merging. A number of synagogues would not even consider this type of conversation because they look at the JCC as in competition for limited community dollars, and that they would lose out in that type of relationship. I disagree. I think that there are opportunities for both to mutually enrich each other, but I think both the JCC, the local JCC, and the local synagogues there has to be groundswell from the community, I think, because often it's not the heads of the agencies that are going to take the steps forward. It has to be the community itself that says, this is what we want. We want a community that is in concert with each other. We want a one pass. We want programs where people from the JCC are coming into the synagogue and people from the synagogue coming into JC. I mean, just to give a very brief example, then I'll stop. We have a youth worker who offers openly to go into the synagogues and do mitzvah programming, who will help enrich what they offer because the synagogues are so busy. Some synagogues will not even return our phone calls. So it's sad.
Yes, Neil.
I want to, I feel that Sarah Cabo is remarkably gentle. And maybe because she's a panelist, maybe she still has to defend. Offensive, but a number of, sparks flew associations. First of all, that for all of the talk of democracy, Mordecai Kaplan did not teach a very democratic atmosphere. He was authoritarian. He was dictatorial. I am right. And he determined curriculum. He determined the textbooks. And we never got the feeling that there was much room for open discussion and democracy in his classroom. Because, of course, he was reflecting the seminary, which was hardly an institution which gave much attention to what the students felt about their own education. That's one thing. So, as a role model for running a school under democratic principles, I think Ramah was remarkably more effective. I remember my first summer in Camp Ramah when students walked in and David McGilville Shalom said, there is no evening programs. They said, why are there no evening programs? Because he said we haven't find them. And then was, then Joel Roth, my longtime friend and colleague, became effectively the director of the camp. Joel Roth ran the committee that planned evening programs, but the evening programs were in our hands. We had to do it. And it was a very valuable sense as a camp that the campers had a say in the way the camp evolved. The other thing that it seems to me is that, I don't know every day school in the country, but there are some day schools that I do know, where the word is, it's a reign of terror. You never challenge the commission, the principal, you never challenge the head teacher, and the mood there is very control from society. I don't know if all day schools in the country are like this, but some decidedly are. And for Sarah to talk about the extent to which, we have a model, role model at democratic society. I think it's very nice and it's very ideal. But I'm not sure that this is what's going on in actual day schools with their needs or any other needs.
Did you want to say something?
Well, first of all, yes, I didn't say that there's right now that we are role modeling. If I conveyed that impression, that was not my intention. I was asking the question of, do we in our educational institutions consider this something that is important? And if we do, how do we show it? And if we don't, and what does that say? That's why I posed that question. To respond to the question of Kaplan as a classroom teacher, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, I didn't have him as a teacher, so I know you did, so I'll trust your judgment on that. But I think that what I was trying to get at was that on a deeper level, the process of formulating decisions and of thinking about what was going to become of Jewish education, that was, on a profound level, a democratic process that was taking place. If it took place in their heads, if it took place in the discussions that you weren't privy to, in the arguments that you weren't privy to, then that I think that it would seem to me to be legitimate to say that was democratic. It may not have been practiced actually in your classroom itself.
I can just say my favorite Kaplan anecdote. One year he assigned a book on Jewish ethics. It was an impossible book. We desperately had it. But he said, I chose it, I want it, this is our textbook. And it was one of those terrible textbooks where there are two columns to a page, so you'll never see it. And the idea was that we read the column and it talks about a virtue in the world, and he would story of how to shape the Tanakh. To which Jack Wilson was sitting next to me, I said, everywhere but in this class. No, he said to me, Mr. Wilson, you have something to tell us. Freedom. And Captain Wilson said, no, Professor, it was from Mr. Gilbert's ears. So Captain, of course, that just got angrier. So he said, well, can we hear it for everybody? And Jack said, you really don't want to hear this. So he said, now I do. So he got up and said, I told some food about how to shoot the Tanakh everywhere but in this class. Captain said, what do you mean by that? So Jack said, I didn't come all the way from Harvard for a Jewish education to read a book on ethics written by a professor of ethics at Texas A&M. Happens to be where this textbook originated, Texas. Oh, by a Texas farmer, he said. One of Lucer's, caustic. After Luce exploded, screamed, read, banged the floor, closed his book and said, you guys don't want to study with me, I don't want to teach you, goodbye if you want.
Oh my gosh.
So we waited. Bernie Madoff was going to come down. David Finkelstein, somebody would come down. And we expected all to be expelled. Nothing. Come back. So we met before the next class, and he said, what are we going to do? So Lucer says, I will apologize, and let's all read the next chapter. Which is about justice or something. So we all walked into class. Captain walked in. He was the only teacher, of course, who had a prayer before every single class. We said, every class. And he sits down. Lucifer puts up his hand, and he says, Captain says, shut up, Lucifer, you've made enough trouble. So we're waiting. Something's going to happen. So he looks up at us and he says, gentlemen, he says, this is the most boring book I have ever read. Now we have a whole year together. What are we going to do with it? So Lucifer says, now may I speak to these children? And Kaplan says, you could all speak together, but in 5 minutes, I want a syllabus for the rest of the year. And out of this came
So,
But-
so